Welcome to this December meeting of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority. I'll call this meeting to order, and please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. That was good. It sounded like there was some harmony in there, so that worked out pretty well. Okay, the first action before us, not action, but the first item that we need to consider is a moment of silence to remember Donald Scanlon, who passed away on November 30th, 2014. You remember Mr. Scanlon provided us with some auditing services in the recent past. And I'm sorry to hear that he's passed on. I knew Don for a long time, actually, and he was a fine man. So we will miss him, and please join me in a moment of silence. Okay, thank you very much. So, moving on then, under public comments, any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. After receiving recognition from myself, please give your name and address for the records. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Is there any public comment this afternoon? Yes, sir.
I'm Dale Watson, 1205 Dundas Road. At the end of your last meeting, towards the end, you had a discussion about involving storm runoff water monitoring. And in the past, I've had to institute programs of stormwater runoff monitoring, and I know what you're up against. In the late 80s, I had to institute such a program, and it was a headache. State regulations don't get simpler and easier as time goes by, so I would imagine that right now it's a colossal headache. At the last meeting, Ted kept saying, and in July they're going to be worse. And I can't imagine them, but I think you should really pay attention to that, because they could be a real drain on your budget. You're going to be saddled with extra personnel time and extra lab fees, and you're paying large lab fees now. And it's going to be more expensive to handle garbage in Del Norte County than it has been in the past. Ted couldn't do anything about this. He's just staff. And he pretty well likes to be in good graces with the state agencies and go along with them. I didn't always do that when I was working with him. Sometimes I went down kicking and screaming, but I still ended up complying. Except in a couple of cases where I was able to get the Water Quality Control Board to draw in their horns, but it wasn't without a real lot of real good support from those above me. So I hope you'll recognize that a lot of the reason why it's so expensive to handle garbage is not your staff or the way they're organized, but state regulations. You're hauling garbage clear to Ashland or somewhere near there, and it costs a lot of money. And you had to do that because of state regulations. So I hope you'll pay attention to what the state is doing and intervene when you can, because if you're trying to reduce the cost of garbage disposal here in Del Norte County, and you're only looking at the local organization, you're swatting at flies while there's a pig in your pantry, taking away all your money. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Any other public comment today? Okay, seeing no other public comment, we'll go back to our open session items. The first item actually is to discuss the meetings of November 17th and December 10th of the Del Norte Solid Waste Task Force. Ted, do you want to introduce this?
Yeah, There we go. I'd be happy to. Essentially, the main regulatory reason for establishing the Solid Waste Task Force is that they can comment on the 5-year review of the Regional Agency Integrated Waste Management Plan, which is the plan that describes how the authority implements all of its recycling, reuse, composting, and household hazardous waste and education and outreach programs. And so we've now completed that 5-year review, and in your board packet you had a draft comment letter from the task force, and they met last night and Monday, and had a revision of those, and so I've handed out a revised letter for each of you. I'll highlight some of the things that got added since then. They wanted to add that this comment letter covers the period between January 2010 and 2014. And in the contents of the letter, one of the things that was highlighted was that in the past, the authority's effort.
Ted, sorry to interrupt. Are we just going to deal with 6.1?
I think,
Or do we wanna-
do you want to deal with this when we come to the actual 5-year review, or?
That would be fine if you'd like.
I'm fine
That's
with
not a
moving
problem.
it up, so if you want to.
The bottom line is that the task force adopted this revised letter, and it's for your consideration, and we can address it at 6.1. That's
Okay.
not a problem with that.
Very good.
We're already on it. I'm in favor of moving it up.
Okay, I don't have any trouble moving it up, and we do have the
Okay.
task force represented here, so why don't you go forward?
Okay, so we'll call this item 6.1 now.
Thank you.
And in the content of the comment letter, the task force did mention that the authority's efforts to educate Del Norte regarding bottle and can recycling has been supported by block grants for the Department of Conservation grants, and the discontinuation of these block grants will likely reduce their regular outreach of the authority to promote bottles and can recycling in coming years. It's relevant, for example, that the ads that we'll be running during January to let people know that we are recycling Christmas trees is paid for by that grant program. So as that grant program goes away, then our expenses will either increase or our outreach will decrease, one of those two. Also, the task force letter includes mentioning that the Hambro WSG now processes and disposes of leaves, grass, and brush at out-of-county facilities, and the authority should evaluate potential strategies to foster development of in-county facilities for processing these materials. And the main reason why CalRecycle asks for a comment letter and does this 5-year review is essentially to assure that each jurisdiction has planned for adequate disposal capacity. So they require, as part of this 5-year review, that we demonstrate that we have 15 years of secured disposal capacity. At this point in time, the authority has just over 15 years of the required disposal capacity, and so consequently, negotiations to secure additional disposal capacity should be completed in the next calendar year so the authority can remain in compliance with this requirement. And finally, the task force did want to add a section saying that the task force is pleased to report that the Solid Waste Management Authority's reuse, recycling, composting, and household hazardous waste programs have resulted in a per capita disposal rate of 3.4 pounds per person per day, which is well under the 4.0 pounds per person target, and 12.6 pounds per employee, which is under the 14.8 pound target. So consequently, the authority's recovery programs are in compliance with these requirements.
Okay. Thank you. I know Mr. Miles is in the audience. Did you want to speak to these matters?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope that everybody on the authority would read what we have done in the last 5 months. I'd like to point out that this 5-year review is the first 5-year review done on time. I mean, it's really done on time. This is the first one that's for the last, 15 years, Mary, we figured?
Yeah, so basically, I think the first 5-year review was 3 years late. It was due in...
You need to turn your mic on, Mary.
It was, the first 5-year review was 3 years late. It was turned in January 2008. And the second 5-year review that was due January 2010 was turned in September 2012, so it was 2.5 years late. And this one is due January, this coming January, and so we are on time.
Excellent.
So I would like to thank, because we are on TV, the members of the task force who put so much hard work into this. Also, I want to make a statement because something Mary pointed out, and so did Pat Brown.
Pat Black, different color.
Pat Black. And this is the concept of our diversion. It is a concept that I deeply believe that through education, we could hit a higher goal. I would hope that this body would think about, since our funding from grants are limited now, that with the assistance of Tommy, because Tommy plays a role, so does Jordan, and so does this authority, that we could develop a better education program. Because the 3 R's actually start with our youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miles.
Is there an action on this item?
Well,
Do we need to accept it, or?
I'll tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to go back to the open session items 1.1 and 1.2 and ask if there's any further discussion we need to do relative to those 2 meetings, or were those 2 meetings just totally associated
FYI.
with the 5-year plan? Okay, very good. Then we'll take this and we'll go to item 6.1.
So the question I have, though, are we accepting the letter and forwarding it? or
The
what?
letter is technically from the task force directly to Cal Recycle. They're set up as an advisory body, but essentially it's intended to be professionals in the industry and people who are concerned about these issues, so that if, for instance, the board was not meeting its responsibilities, it would be possible for community commentary. So there's really nothing for the board
So
to
we
do with
acknowledge
respect
it,
to
or?
that letter.
Yeah.
But regarding item 6.1, we are looking for approval to submit this 5-year review, and the task force letter would be attached to that.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you. I think before we go to that, I'd like to ask if there's any public comment on the 5-year review matter. 6.1, any public comment?
Catherine Murray, I'm a resident of the city and the county. Congratulations on your timely review for the task force. I have a couple of questions and comments. Under education and public information, I looked online on item number 2, and I believe once you finally hire a permanent executive director and you have your program manager back in place, I'm hoping full-time, because I believe that that's warranted, that you could find, what I found online is that there are other grants available for the education component, and I sincerely believe that that is a critical piece for our recycling program here in Del Norte County. So that's a comment. And then I want to thank Recology and Hambro for doing the recycling on the Christmas trees, and hope that we can continue to do that at a low cost. I don't know if they can somehow use that as a community outreach and write it off as a tax credit for something like that as a community benefit, just a possibility, because otherwise we're going to see Christmas trees all over the place once again. And then
What do you say? I didn't follow.
if we have to charge customers for disposing of their Christmas trees under item number 8, I'm sorry, I didn't identify that. The Christmas trees, item number 8. So,
Okay.
And then what I'm wondering about is under item number 9, the overall effectiveness is being reassessed, and I'm wondering, is it considered ineffective? I didn't understand that comment there, so I'm not sure what that means.
With the chair's permission, it's unusual that we answer
So
questions
I
Right.
understand that.
But I can provide additional information.
Okay, then when you finish, Ms.
So
Murray, we'll
that's
go ahead
just
and
a
get that.
question, and because it wasn't really clarified there. And then under item number 10, the local task force supports the use of extended producer responsibility, which I am in great support of in the product stewardship and grants. And I'm really excited about that comment, but it sort of seems to contradict, or it confused me about comments under number 9 to 11 and 12. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Mr. Ward, can you
I'd be
expound
happy
on
to.
that?
So on item number 9, what it says is the authority should direct staff to reassess and evaluate the overall effectiveness of household hazardous waste collection events as a primary tool for collection and proper disposal of common household hazardous waste. So even though we do have a one-day collection event where we take all hazardous materials, realistically, such collection events are only available for a few hours out of the entire year. And so industry-wide, generally, one can never expect to collect more than about 15% of the hazardous waste that's out there through such events, because most people don't take the time and effort necessary to engage in that sort of collection system. And so it's important to realize that while we have this program, it's important to continue the program. We shouldn't fool ourselves that we're getting all of the hazardous waste because we have a single-day event. So consequently, it makes more sense in terms of customer convenience to try to have as many hazardous materials that can be accepted at the transfer station or some other regular location. That's what we want to do. And actually, the product stewardship programs that we've established have helped us do exactly that. So for instance, we have a dramatically expanded paint recycling program through our product stewardship program with Paint Care. We accept all household batteries through our product stewardship partnership with Call to Recycle. We're also recycling all carpet padding and carpeting through our product stewardship partnership with the Carpet America Recovery Effort. So those are what I would consider more effective ways to collect those materials because they're available every day. Even though some of them do have a small cost, it's still less than the cost of regular disposal.
Okay, thank you. I know that some of the authority members will want to comment on this, but I'll ask for any other public comment. Any other public comment? Yes.
In looking at, I'm sorry, Elizabeth Henry. I
Thank
live
you.
in the county. And looking at the overall section in number 14 that talks about having to renegotiate or negotiate further the 15 years of capacity, I would just like to remind the board that you just out of hand a number of months ago rejected a free offer from Cal Recycle to study your waste stream. And I think it's really imperative that someone contact them, I guess that would be the acting director, and see if that kind of effort can still be done. I just don't know how you can negotiate without having full information, and if they will come here and look at what's being thrown away and what still could be recycled, I think that would be just a really helpful thing. And at the time that you rejected it, you just said Ted wouldn't have time to do it, but I think that it's worthwhile because I think it's going to help you throughout the future to know what exactly people are throwing away. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, I'll bring it back to the board. Are there any comments or questions
No,
from the
I'm
board?
I think Solid Waste Task Force, good job. I know it's had multiple people on it, and I'm glad it got in on a timely basis. Good job.
I did want to speak and take a few minutes of time if I could. I actually spent quite a bit of time on the 5-year review as I was prior chair to the task force back in 2012. And I did go through all of the electronic annual reports, compared them year to year to see the differences and the changes, and, learned a few different things in regards to some of those categories get shifted around a bit here and there. But I did want to, today I'm sewing this up in that I also had an issue back in 2012, and I'd like to just kind of publicly put some closure to it in regards that I personally was called out through a staff report in 2012 that and I'll just read in here what it says, is that the board directed the chair, who assumed responsibility for preparing agendas to this body, to include the mandated 5-year review of the county integrated waste management plan on its agendas until the task is completed. And what happened at that time is that the 10-person board said that you've got to do this right now publicly, so it seemed as if I wasn't getting my work done as the chair. And coming into when I was trained in originally, I had met with Mr. Ward, and he had told me that it had already been done. But then through the course of time, I didn't really have any background documentation after I had kind of been pulled out publicly for not doing my work, so to say. I did go back and I found an email. In the email from Mr. Ward, again, I'll just read this out here, and again, just to put some closure on this. And this comes from October 4th from Mr. Ward, that he had sent an email back in April this year that said the 2010 5-year review had been completed, and that I forgot that the former task force had completed the 2010 review already. I apologize that I did not recall this sooner. And then it was, again, because of some research on my end, we did find out that the task force had done the report. The board had all signed the report, but unfortunately it didn't get sent in to Cal Recycle. And so, again, I know it was straightened out through the task force, but I don't feel publicly that it ever was, because I don't want to say it was reprimanded, but that would probably be a word publicly. And so then this report that is going in today is a different 5-year report, and I have stayed on the task force to see this completed. And it is going in on time. The last 5-year report that was due from 2010, did get turned in 2.5 years late. So I just wanted to indulge your time to kind of clarify that, because it didn't ever really get clarified publicly before, that I had been doing what I was told that it was already done, so that's why I didn't work on it. And so I was shocked when I got called out publicly that I wasn't doing my work. So anyway, I wanted to speak to that. I'm happy that it's completed, and I feel that it's a good report. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I too am excited that it's going in on time this year. And Mr. Nia, did you have anything you wanted to add? Okay, yes, Mr.
I
Sullivan.
did want to add one thing in there, and under the education and public outreach, because Mr. Miles mentioned it also, but I know on one of item number 3 under education and public information, that was a private contractor that did the education outreach on that. So grants are nice, and then that's the second question that I have to follow up on that, but that particular education outreach was done with no grants. So my question is, the grants that the authority has gotten before, couldn't those be consulted out or farmed out basically with the authority overseeing the grant?
Part of the reason with these grants, the block grant that I was referring to is being discontinued by the state.
okay.
So there isn't another party that we can work with. It would become a competitive grant, and the authority can still apply for those. And we could work with the consultants potentially in that regard.
Okay. Well, and then maybe, like we've talked a couple meetings ago, of maybe talking to both contractors, both Ambrose and Recology, of saying, what other education outreach services could you have to begin to continue the recycling and stuff. So I think there's resources right now that are there that we should be taking advantage of right now. I mean, the school district's a perfect example of a private-public partnership in that. So anyway, I would go ahead and make my original motion to go ahead and approve or recognize the letter I'm not exactly sure what the motion should.
But it sounds like this is a two-part. We could acknowledge the receipt of the letter from the Del Norte Task Force, but then I think we require approval of the 5-year study being sent into the,
Direction to submit the 5-year review report.
Okay, so that motion would contain all of that.
And I'll second.
okay?
Yeah.
Second? Okay, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, Karen, would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Neum?
Yes.
And Vice Chairman Holly?
Yes.
And we probably should get some receipt that they received it. That would be the only thing I would say.
Okay. We can, okay, very good. Good idea. Okay, so, it's interesting, we went a little bit out of sequence, but now we're time for our consent agenda. Our consent agenda includes the approval of the minutes from our regular session on Wednesday, November 13th, receiving and filing hazardous waste generator inspection report of the 14th of November, and the California Environmental Reporting System submittal summary, filing a letter sent to Del Norte mattress retailers regarding SB 254, approving payment of claim to North Coast Laboratories for invoices 117811, 117812, and 117813 in the amount of $22,552. Approval of the payment of claim to North Coast Laboratories for the invoice 118620 in the amount of $8368. Approval of the payment from Clean Harbors Environmental Services for the invoice in the amount of $29,293, and approval of a budget transfer in the amount of $592. So that said, is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing no public comment, then we'll
Move
go
to approve.
Okay.
Can I? Oh,
Okay,
yes.
we have a motion and a second?
We're gonna vote.
Yes, discussion.
Oh, yes, I just wanted to discuss item 2.4, 2.5, and 2.6 in regards to North Coast Laboratories invoices. And again, I feel that it would be wise to go out shopping prices. These tests were very high. I know, I'm familiar with testing that has to get in 24 hours and the chain of command that it needs to follow, but I think that we might be able to go over into maybe the Medford area or maybe further away to try and get some better pricing on these, since we have such extensive bills to North Coast Lab. It's always a wise idea to shop prices. So I would recommend that we, like I had asked earlier from Mr. Ward if there was some industry numbers on what the typical costs are for these type of testing. It would have to be someone close by, but I think that we need to take a look at that. There's a lot of money being spent there.
Okay.
I'm in agreement with that. I mean, I think on the motion, though, we'd want to approve this, but then also, give direction to get a couple other on, are these annual contracts, or we're just doing this?
It's a service agreement, and it is not on an annual basis, but there are not really other competing labs that are within the region. Part of the multiple challenges involved, as Commissioner Wilson mentioned, the samples, once collected, really need to get to the lab and start the analysis within 24 hours, so there's a geographic limitation to that. And then there's also the issue that some labs can do some tests, but not others. And so North Coast Labs is able to cover a wide variety of tests, but one of the reasons why this most recent round of sampling is more expensive is that this is part of what we call the constituent of concern monitoring. I've mentioned that several times, but it's a much more comprehensive suite of tests we need to run. They do send out some of those for additional analysis to outside labs, but consequently, this is the big, expensive monitoring program that we have to do every 5 years.
You said, but when is the annual contract come up?
It could come up whenever we say, pretty much.
Oh, kind of, it's
I don't think
open-ended, we could do
it's
that
not
anytime.
It doesn't have a specific end, it's more of a service agreement.
Okay.
Well, we can continue to watch for opportunities. Is that okay? I mean, I don't know if there's any more directive than that.
The only place I could think that would be, Medford would be, or Grants Pass would be the only other two places that might be worth checking to see if they can do the same service. I mean, we can save some money. That's a lot of money that we have going out for it.
Just a couple calls and see if there's any other options.
It's much, just to make you all aware, it's much more complicated than just a couple phone calls. because you really need to look at what is the total suite of tests you're trying to do. They have to look, part of how one saves money in terms of doing water sampling and water analysis is how the labs themselves consolidate the testing suites. So you'll run a number of analytes on a particular sample, and depending upon the combination of analytes and the capacities of that particular laboratory, that can be where the cost savings is. So rather than filling up 5 different bottles and sending them all, you fill up 1 bottle and then they run the samples off that 1 bottle. This discussion also regularly mentions that perhaps we should work with the city wastewater treatment plant laboratory, and we've explored that many times and essentially similar conclusions.
I know there's some limitations. We
They
send
can run
things out
some of
as
the
well.
tests, but not others. They'd have to be prepped, and there's always that. Part of the issue also is the laboratory needs to know what samples are coming in, because sometimes they need to prepare the lab so that when they receive the samples, they're ready to run them right away. So,
Okay.
just additional issues.
Okay, well, thank you. So we have the consent agenda before us as a whole. Any further discussion on the consent agenda?
Right, you know, I would call it, I mean, at this point, the test's already been done. I don't think, at this point, it's just paying the bill.
Right.
So I'd call the question.
Okay, we'll call the question. Would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Neal?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
And Vice Chairman Holly?
Yes. Okay, thank you. So moving on, under discussion and action items, we have no landfill post-closure items. Under the collections franchise, there's a discussion and possible action, status, and allocation of authority bin
kidding me?
pools for
Is this a
2014.
standing? I'm sure we're going to take a vote in the audience, see if we can make this.
we wanna keep this
standing
under an hour?
line item Every single meeting.
This, I think Mr. Ward has a solution, and he'll advise us of that.
Yeah, I'd just recommend that we use the remaining bins and use them for bin pulls out at Gasky and Klamath.
Move to accept staff recommendation on the bins.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. In fairness, I think we need public comment, if there is any public comment.
I think
Okay,
we should,
very good. So,
take time
no
on
other
bins.
discussion amongst the board here?
Call the
Okay,
question.
please,
Please.
please poll the vote.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes, please.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Neal?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Holly?
Yes, thank you. Okay, number 5, under the transfer station, discussion and possible action regarding policies related to charge applications from out-of-state companies. Mr. Ward.
Yes, essentially, we have an issue trying to collect on out-of-state checks, and we also have an interest in trying to make this transfer station available to all customers who are interested in using it. And so there are some construction companies out of Oregon that are interested in establishing a charge account, but because of the limitations on collecting outstanding balances, what staff recommendation is that the board adopt a policy that new authority charge account applications include a canceled or voided check from an active account with a California address, and direct staff and legal counsel to update the cover letter and charge account application form as part of the implementation of this policy. I'd also like to acknowledge that Commissioner Wilson called this afternoon and suggested that we add to the application form, which is attached in the staff report, that we add date of birth, as she says that that is useful in terms of establishing the customer and collectability on the accounts.
For law enforcement, they need the name and date of birth. So if it were on this form, it would make it a lot easier for law enforcement if they had to follow through.
Okay. That change is okay. I don't know how much people are hesitant to put dates of birth on forms now, but we can try and do that.
Well, they don't have to have an account. They can always
That's-
pay as they
that's
go,
true.
So they
That's
don't need
true.
a charge account.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we,
I'm sorry. I'd like to ask for public comment
Oh.
first. Any public comment on this matter? Thank you. Keep getting that sequence.
Catherine Murray still. I think this is a great idea. I remember when I was on this board that we had a lot of delinquent accounts, and it's very difficult to collect. I was a collection person in a former life. I'd like to make one recommendation for businesses that you obtain their, through the department, the Board of Equalization for whatever state that they're in, their business license, and then verify that they're currently that they have a current business license, because that way you could track them easier. And then if they are not really in good standing, or they intend to be fraudulent, that maybe they would not follow through with getting a charge account with us.
Okay?
Thank you. And then include that in the policy that you develop.
Thank you. Okay, very good. Any other public comments on this? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring this back to the board.
Not to throw a spur in the business license, but in the county, businesses aren't required to get a license. There is no business license. So I don't know if that would, if they're city businesses, they have to have a license, but county businesses aren't required to have one, so. Depends on the business you're in, so.
We can certainly include it on the form, and if they fill it out, that
I
gives
would
us
put
one
more
more,
as an if
one
or
more
not.
piece of information
Yeah.
to go after 'em.
Can't hurt.
No. Okay. So again, I'd entertain a motion. Yes, and I interrupted.
Yeah, I'll move to approve the suggested changes, but also include under owners for their date of birth.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
No, I'll second.
Very good. We have a motion and a second with that change. Any further discussion? Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chair, who's the second?
Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah.
Okay, seeing no other, would you please poll the vote? Okay.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Holly?
Yes, okay, thank you. And we had handled 6.1 already. 6.2, information and discussion regarding the meetings and status relating to the job description and recruitment or release of a request for proposals for the position of interim director for the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority. Mr. Ward?
Yes, there is no attachment to this, but we did have a meeting on Monday, and I think we have adequate direction to move ahead. I'd be happy to offer any further details, but
Yeah, and I think we also talked about the potential special meeting, but more than likely, the first meeting in January, there would be an approval of listing something at that point, just to keep the public involved in the process.
Yes, and just so everyone here knows, what we've done is we met with the CEOs of both the city and the county, and talked about how they've done interim positions in the past to get a sense of our limitations and what we could go forward with. And so we have some templates we could probably use in the future, but I think the way we left it is Mr. Ward is going to be working with Mr. Young to maybe pare down that job description we had. It was a little daunting, and I think the more daunting it is, the more money people will expect. And since this is basically a custodial interim position, we're going to try and simplify that. So I appreciate your efforts in that ahead of time. Thank you. So I don't think there's any action necessary for this, but we wanted to give you an update. Any other questions about it? Okay. I will ask, is there any public comment or questions about this process? Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and we'll move on to 6.3. This is discussion and possible action regarding the content of the final R3 report, including but not limited to developing elements of a strategic plan, such as short, medium, and long-range goals, and possible setting of future meeting dates for such planning. And I'll say ahead of time that I think Mr. Gitlin wanted this on so that we don't lose track of the R3 and our strategic planning process. So first, I guess I'd ask if there's any public comment. No public comment. We'll bring it back here to the dais. Any questions, concerns? Okay, very good. I don't think anything's happened since the last meeting, so I didn't anticipate action on that item, but we have addressed it. So moving on, Mr. Ward, to Director and Treasurer's reports. 7.1, your report.
okay. So just reviewing some of the highlights, as I do. This is a partial list of significant activities since the last authority meeting. Probably the big one is we had a wall knocked down. A woman shortly after midnight on December 5th drove into our wall, and it came down in a piece. CHP sticker. In fact, if you see the pictures cycling through there, you'll see Mr. Wallen looking at that yellow tag there that's on that pillar, and that provided the information needed so that we could track down the CHP traffic collision report, and that got us to the insurance, which hopefully will cover this.
Did you read the report?
I only had the cover sheet of
Was
the
the person
report.
arrested or cited?
I did not see that.
It's kind of hard to drive off the roadway at that angle, especially after midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning.
I can't comment on that. I don't know.
Okay. At
Okay.
least they're insured.
And
How much
and
is
hopefully
that gonna-
we'll be covered.
How much is that going to cost?
The first estimate that we just received was about $8,700.
The wall comes as one section they'll have to pour or pre-make?
Yeah, it's what has to happen is they have to set up forms and pour the wall as a piece, let it cure, and then they have to get a heavy piece of equipment to lift it up and drop it into the slots you see on those pillars.
So they won't form it there?
They won't form it in place vertically. They will form it at the transfer station
And then
on a
have to
slab
lift
we
it.
have on a horizontal basis. And then after it's cured, they'll lift it up and put it in place.
And all that'll be covered in that cost?
It should all be covered by the insurance, but I am still seeing if I might get another bid, but I'm not sure that I will.
Okay.
And I have to say that I don't have the bid immediately in front of me, so I'm a little nervous about quoting the price.
Okay.
That seems really high.
I may be misquoting that, so I would like to walk back that statement,
That may
because
be
I'm
the
not
whole
exactly
total.
sure what the amount was.
They have to get a crane, and that might be the complete.
No, a lot of contractors have their own big equipment. I would suggest Gavin Construction or Haven Construction specialize in cement
The
work.
proposal I have is from Haven Construction. I have called Gavin, I've called several other contractors. Haven was the only one that showed up, and of course, it is a security issue, so we'd like to get it repaired right away.
And this, and it is covered by the driver's insurance?
State Farm says they will cover the claim.
So we're not overly concerned about,
Just the security.
cost.
It's the security issue, and again, it's just great working with the Hambro WSG crew. They were on it straight away, making sure that we had temporary fencing up so that it's less of a security concern. But I just continue to appreciate working with them.
Great, good news, thank you. Okay. Other parts of your report? Is there anything else?
Sorry, yes, that wasn't the only thing that happened. So, at the landfill, I did surface water testing and stormwater testing, and I worked with the county to do the groundwater sampling to complete the constituent and concern monitoring. Unfortunately, we did discover that the trash pump we had purchased recently was actually stolen from the household hazardous waste building, so we have a different storage strategy once we order another one. They're about $270 to $300 a piece, so it's not a big cost in terms of the pump, but there's about the same amount of cost in terms of fittings. So we do have to replace that. There was also a fire at the Klamath Transfer Station. A person was disposing of what he claimed were cold ashes, and our gate attendant did feel the outside of the container, and it was cold at the time, but once they got emptied and a few other customers came in, there was a fire in the bin. Thankfully, the bin was not too severely damaged. Jeremy may be able to comment on that. I haven't actually seen the bin. But grateful there wasn't further damage, and all parties seem to have responded very well. Not only the 911 folks, but our gate attendants. They closed the lid as soon as they could to try to quash the fire, and we're all grateful that there wasn't more problems associated with that. I've been working with Authority Treasurer Rich Taylor in preparation of the financial transactions report, which has now been submitted. It's worth mentioning that the extended medical leave of the authority's administrative assistant continues to leave remaining staff overextended or working out of class. I've been trying so far without success to reach some resolution on this issue with the county personnel department, and in the meantime, the authority still has our account clerk working out of class to fill the administrative assistant duties, and for the past 18 months, one person has been assigned all duties for both the program manager and the director positions. The refuse site attendant, Keith Estes, continues to help with accounts payable and receivable. At present, the authority remains short-staffed with respect to accounting, personnel, administration, and contract oversight. Coming up in the next month, of course, we have our ongoing activities and the ones we're discussing at this meeting. But in addition, we are working to try to establish the ability to accept credit cards from charge account customers in the authority's office, and we have a few more hoops to jump through there. We're continuing to work on the expired marine flare issue. Let's see. Again, still languishing are some of the communications with the Regional Water Quality Control Board regarding the threat and complexity rating at the landfill and regarding the stormwater monitoring requirements out at the landfill.
And number 9, and again, that's what Mr. Watson just referred to, is that staff should be working to remove stormwater monitoring reporting requirements associated with the Crescent City landfill before these additional requirements become effective starting July 2015. And I spoke with Mr. Ward in regards to this earlier because I did have some questions at the last meeting. And again, Mr. Watson explaining how important this is. And I do think that this needs to be worked on. And as we were discussing this, we talked about some of the different laws that are but I was hoping that this list that of major activities to-do list, I would like to kind of see it kind of put together in a kind of a heavier weighted priority. And so those things that are the most important things maybe go to the front of the list. Like I put a number 1 next to number 9 because I felt that it's so important. So that would help, maybe this board could give some direction on things that could be worked on. And I don't know what would be actually required to try and get number 9 accomplished.
Additional staff capacity is really kind of critical to this because I can try to do the testing, I can try to keep up with the requirements, but there's a whole another set of efforts required to actually negotiate with the Regional Water Quality Control Board and reduce those requirements. So
would more testing be necessary in order to try and turn it around at this time, or would you use the results from prior tests and put that together in some type of report and then present it to, let's see, Regional Water Quality Control Board?
I think it's probably more of a comprehensive negotiation. I would easily see the item listed under number 8 and the item listed under number 9 to be combined because they both have to do with the Regional Water Quality Control Board monitoring requirements at the Crescent City landfill. It's important to realize that also that these increased requirements for stormwater monitoring will impact both the stormwater monitoring at the landfill and the transfer station. But because the transfer station is active and we regularly have traffic there, I don't think there's any way that we will be relieved of our stormwater monitoring. However, at the Crescent City landfill, there's almost no traffic out there on a functional basis, and so the same concerns about activities out there potentially impacting stormwater, I think, are much less. And that is my hope, that by negotiating with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, they might agree to that issue.
So part of this is that the stormwater would be their concern, like on blacktop areas, if so, oil from cars and things would get into the stormwater, and so that's why they would, want this testing done. But yet here out at the landfill, where there isn't any traffic, it's something that, really isn't common sense would tell you don't need to do this, and so, but it's need to put forward, like I said, I don't know if it's a report or a letter or exactly. I'm just trying to get it's not really more testing.
No, I don't. Unlike the other situation with the waste discharge requirements issue, which is kind of a completely separate issue, where we had to drill additional wells and provide more information in hopes of negotiating a change in our regulatory structure. This one, I don't think more data does anything. It's more a matter of clearly indicating this is a facility that's closed to general traffic, and so there's very little potential impact to stormwater. But that is a formal process, and I think it probably starts with the letter, but
Is that to that Gina Morrison?
it probably would start there, but where it goes and exactly what the process is, I'm not clear on that just yet. But I still think it is worth pursuing if there's staff capacity, and this is a priority for the board to pursue, because without doing it, almost certainly the monitoring and reporting requirements with regards to landfill and stormwater will increase in July 2015.
And the cost.
And the cost associated with that.
Well, so, it's really important, and it seems like an easy.
It seems like if we're successful in finding an interim director, that should free Mr. Ward up some to do some of these things that should be a higher priority.
What do you think about setting this list kind of in a different order?
I think that would make sense. Prioritize what are going to be the most important, critical things and go down versus,
Yeah, not really the easiest things first, but the most important things first, so just I don't know, it just would help out
My thought is, Ted, you probably already have those things in your head, so it would just be a matter of.
for us.
I'll do my best to have the future listing reflect its urgency.
And some of the things that are easy squeezy, you can take out of order. What? Easy squeezy? Is this, I have a,
yeah, it's a
words are a plaything to me, Mr. Sullivan. Okay, very good. Thank you. Is there anything more on your report, Ted?
No, that's good.
Okay, very good. So, moving forward then, the next item on our agenda is the Treasurer Controller Report for October 2014. Mr. Taylor?
I have the 4-month report from the auditor's office, and it shows us with cash $581,918.94, and we have a iBank loan deposit for $198,177.17. For the 4 months, we showed a profit on a cash basis of $174,193.67.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Taylor?
yeah, I'm
Yes.
sorry, I got one question for you, Rich. Are we listing those 3 acres of commercial property under the land assets?
Should be under there.
Okay, so what are we figuring for the value of those?
Last I heard, you were going to get a realtor to give you some kind of but they're at cost is what they're at, so it
Okay,
won't,
that's
won't
what
show
they
up
were
on here
paying.
until there's a sale.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
What is the land zoned?
I think the zoned industrial.
I think it's heavy commercial.
Heavy
The-
commercial?
Yeah, the transfer station property is industrial. The other adjacent property that the authority owns is heavy commercial.
Okay, claims approved by the Treasurer and Director for November 2014.
Well, usually, as normal, the biggest payment goes to Hambro for their good work. Also listed on here, and I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but was the payment to Clean Harbors for the household hazardous waste collection event, which we just approved as part of the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. The monthly cash and charge reports for November 2014?
Yes, generally, we're doing just fine, though, as per normal. Starting in the fall and winter months, the revenues at the transfer station go down. So that's fairly normal. And just summarizing compared to how we're doing on our projections, currently our revenue overall for fiscal year 14-15 is $26,000 ahead of budget from the transfer station, and $2,425 behind budget for franchise fees. So on the whole, we're ahead of budget.
That's a good ratio. Thank you. So the revenue comparisons we just did. So
Yep.
Before we move to adjournment, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Sullivan for being here. This is your last meeting?
This is my well, unless we have another special meeting.
Well, okay, well,
No.
it'll be special if you're there.
Well, thank you.
But if we don't see you at that meeting, thank you for all the work you've done for this organization, and we'll miss Mary and I were talking earlier, we'll kind of miss your institutional memory going forward, so
May I
we may
suggest-
be calling on you.
If we discuss bin allocations, I think Mr. Sullivan's
Yeah.
input would be really
I
valuable.
know he's a specialist. So, thank you. Thanks. Did you want to say a speech of any kind?
No.
Okay.
No, I've done my speeches for the week.
You're done with speeches. Very good. So, seeing nothing else before us, I'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting until January 14th, 2015, our next regularly scheduled meeting. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. And thank you for your...